The landscapes of our lives are for learning, where experience is our teacher. When we gather together to share our resources, we are destined to love and thrive. Good morning, Pierre.
Well, that was a sweet one. Good morning, Maureen. I think we're kind of tag teaming and doing something on Jack Kornfield today.
Tag teaming, you and I?
Well,
He
you and I, but I mean,
Tara Brach.
piggybacking on Tara Brach because they're kind of like this little bit of a partnership. So maybe I'll just launch into Jack.
I know, just before you start, I know the one thing they have in common is they're both Buddhist psychologists.
Okay, right. And as we discussed in the Tara Brach one, they're both this crossover person that, grew up in Western society, had some exposure to Eastern ideas, and then kind of drifted off that way. And now, decades and decades later, they've found, avenue for their ideas, where they were just kind of like a little stream. Now these waters are coming together, making a river of all these people and ideas and connecting Eastern wisdom. So let me just
I feel like didn't they bring, Jack Kornfield bring Buddhism to the West like Alan Watts did, and they started that Insight Meditation Center, a bunch of these people, Joseph Goldstein and that whole group in Sharon Salzberg, and they've actually had these places, Spirit Rock and so forth, for a while now.
Yeah, no, they have.
The community's grown over time, obviously.
Yeah, but here are the dates. The dude is born in 1945. So he's about 8 years older than Tara Brach. And his dad is Jewish, as you might suspect from the name, one of four brothers. He's a fraternal twin. His father was a scientist and interested in healing and medicine. Young Jack goes off to Dartmouth, excuse me, and New Englander, and he graduates and goes into the Peace Corps. Now, the interesting thing about the Peace Corps is he ends up in the Mekong, not the Delta, which is Vietnam, upper Mekong, which is back up in the forests of Thailand. And he runs into a guy, I don't know exactly what a forest master is, but his name is Aja Cha.
Yeah.
And he learns some wisdom there. He goes to, that's in Thailand. He goes to Burma and studies with a master there. He also goes to India. So now he's trained in meditation and these Eastern arts. He comes back to the United States, excuse me, in 72, 74. So we're after the 60s, we're beginning the 70s and, disco and whatnot. And he starts to find a path forward. You mentioned the Insight Center. And then out here in California, he's the co-founder of Spirit Rock, which is in Woodacre, California. And he does that in 1987. So these are the dates. 1987 is a long ways from the 60s. That's about almost 30 years from the Summer of Love, 67, that, Spirit Rock is founded. And yes, now 10 years later, we're, 97, we're beginning the internet age, and this stuff is exploding on us over the next 20 years. And here we are. And that's Jack Kornfield. One last thing, and I'll let you get into it. He writes this book. I think it's one of his early ones. And I think it's cute. After the Ecstasy, the Laundry.
Yeah. That's good.
And I love that about some of these guys. There's this blissful goal that they're involved in, but when they stay in it long enough, it's, what's the reality that we're dealing with on a day-by-day basis, and can we accept it and live in bliss with, doing the laundry, but
with your feet on the ground.
Yeah. Well, take a swing at Jack here and tell us about him.
I think I found him through maybe through Ferriss podcast. I'm not really sure, but I read his book The Wise Mind, and I remember just hearing him, listening to some talks. I remember walking down the beach and listening to him, and I always thought he just had a soothing voice as opposed to Tara Brach, whose voice I just doesn't resonate. That's
Right. You
okay.
mentioned.
Someone for everyone. And so I've found him as this like kind paternal sort of voice that
Mhm.
really was comforting to me. And I
Mhm.
think a lot of the same messages, obviously, because it's Buddhist psychology, as Tara Brach is, letting go of the struggle against what is, stop trying to fix, and really compassion, I think, is his big. That's what I associate with him. Jack Kornfield is this message of compassion and
Kind of like,
how to soothe, I think, and maybe that's the soothing is what I associate with his voice too, of soothing your suffering and your desire to feel like you're enough and fix yourself and force yourself to be more disciplined and better, but to kind of recognize that as, like, it's okay, honey, stop beating yourself up, stop, this trance of unworthiness, of what Tara
Mhm.
Brach would call a trance of unworthiness, and stop forcing yourself to be better, and just
Mhm.
really accept that, the wholeness of who you are, and that,
Mhm.
to kind of develop this relationship with yourself and your own suffering with compassion. And I remember I learned that lesson at yoga training, that, you know, stop trying so hard with
You,
intensity in your type
you,
A conquering
you learn that at yoga training.
suffering. Yeah, trying to conquer your suffering, and, and discipline yourself, and, to
Well,
a
you were
certain extent
experiencing
that's
you were experiencing some health challenges at yoga training, and then trying to push yourself and kind of running into that. Did that
no, not
intersection lead to that?
that's true, but no, it wasn't that so much as it was just who I was up until that time, of
Mm,
my attitude towards myself and my relationship with myself and my body. My body, as an athlete, I was designed to accomplish things and to push and to, you know, make my body strong and make it do things, and being very authoritative over myself,
mm,
and less compassionate towards like my limitations. You know what I mean?
mhm,
It's like, oh, if I have a limitation, then I need to strengthen that. I need to hammer away at that and make it better and improve it.
mhm, mhm.
Instead of like,
More soothing
accepting that I had
acceptance,
limitations, and
right?
that's okay. And I remember the lady in front of me telling me to, like, she's like, if you're treating yourself that way, like with no compassion and just kind of beating yourself up and pushing yourself and being too authoritarian towards
Mhm.
myself, then how are you going to help people like embrace their suffering with
Did
compassion? So
lady in front of you at yoga training?
yeah, she was a teacher from Australia, and she could sense that I was like, killing myself behind her.
Mhm.
And she turned around and, said something to me, and I'll never forget it. It was Julia. I forget her last name, but she was from Australia. Nice lady. But anyways, that self-compassion, back to Jack Kornfield, like,
Mhm.
I think that's why I really like him, and he talks about it with a gentle tone and a gentle approach, and yeah, that's kind of what I
That's
associate with him.
that's neat. These Eastern influences are coming out of, in Jack Kornfield's case, Thailand and Burma and India. They're Buddhist. little different versions in each of those. We've got the Dalai Lama, who's about compassion. And it's interesting. I might note that Jack Kornfield's sort of tradition is rooted in Vipassana, which is a Burmese tradition. We can get into that on another day. I'm a Vipassana practitioner. That's so cute. You go to one of their sessions and it's a week-long meditation, no talking, vegetarian food, basically one meal a day. You get up early before sunrise and you meditate into the evening. There's some breaks in there. But once you complete that, you're called an old student. And it's so cute, I think, and sort of accepted into the tradition. Go back for more if you want. Anyway, but what I was going to say about Vipassana and Burma is Burma was such an isolated, Myanmar, sorry, folks, was such an isolated country that the tradition as it came from the Buddha kind of remained encapsulated in an early form, where India was such a vibrant place with all kinds of teachers and, medicine men and this and that and the next thing, that everybody kind of co-opted pieces of the Buddha's teaching, and it kind of dissipated a little bit, got diluted. And it was predicted, I don't know by who, that the Burmese tradition would be something that would rise again in the 20th century. And this gentleman, forget his initials, at the beginning,
Goenka.
Yeah, he kind of fulfilled that prophecy and had a resurrection of the Burmese tradition. So anyway, that's Jack Kornfield. And
before we wrap up, can I read a quote from his book?
Yeah, please.
A couple, because I think they're good.
Yeah.
This is from chapter 2, The Wise Heart. He said, "When I first came to Buddhist practice as a monk, I wasn't conscious of how much pain I carried." And it reminds me of when you said, like, going and doing these meditations. This, I think a lot of times people think, oh, like these people are still and calm and breathing, and there's a lot of pain involved in this process too. So anyways, he said, "I had managed to shut down the childhood memories of violence, the self-doubt and feelings of unworthiness, and the struggle to be loved. In meditation and the monastery life, they all came up. The stored history, the judgments, and buried pains. At first, the demanding schedule and practices increased my sense of struggle and unworthiness. I tried to force myself to be disciplined, to be better. Eventually, I discovered that unworthiness is not helped by striving. I learned that for real healing, I needed compassion." And so, it just speaks to that struggle that so many people have. Yeah. And to respond to your own pain, first to notice it, how much is really there. When you stop and try to do these disciplines, which is, I think, why they are disciplines. They put you in a structure so that you can discover these things about yourself.
Like you were saying about the yoga, you were trying to strive. And our very first interviewee, Xerxes, you have to go within. He was constantly doing marathons. He's,
so common to so many people, I think, and that's a Western mindset kind of thing too. I think that's a cultural, the striving. And so it's interesting that this Buddhist psychologist, bring this to the Western culture.
It's an antidote, isn't it?
Oh, it's totally helpful.
Yeah. What's another one?
And I see this, I hear this exact stuff from clients all the time. Like, I think most people suffer in this way. The other thing that I thought was cool is the sword of compassion, which I think is also
I
important
haven't heard that.
too. Oh, the sword of compassion. Yeah.
No.
So the sword of compassion is like, he says right here, the no, saying no. The no is said not out of hate, but out of an unwavering care. Buddhists call this the fierce sword of compassion. It is the powerful no of leaving a destructive family, the agonizing no of allowing an addict to experience the consequences of his acts. You know, like,
Ooh,
right.
I've never heard it described that way or encapsulated so well in 3 phrases. That's amazing. Can you actually repeat that?
Yes, I can. It's another thing people have problems saying no too, right? Like the no is said not out of hate, but out of an unwavering care. Buddhists call this the fierce sword of compassion. It is the powerful no of leaving a destructive family, the agonizing no of allowing an addict to experience the consequences of his acts. You know, it's kind of like, yeah.
The fierce sword of compassion. Wow.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. Like when I think of that, in if I'm kind of using reality therapy, you know, in sessions with people, it's like sometimes when I write up my notes, I say I like used compassionate confrontation, you know, like helping, telling the truth is hard, you
Mhm.
know, or like, but you do it with compassion, you know what I mean? Like it's constructive feedback that's honest, that it's probably going to hurt the listener, the recipient.
Mhm.
And but if you don't do that and you aren't honest and give feedback that's can be hurtful, because the process of healing involves a little bit of crisis and pain, you're not doing the person any favors, right?
Mhm.
By not doing that, because you're, you know what I mean,
Mhm.
because you're afraid to hurt someone's feelings. So I feel like
Mhm.
to do what's hard with the right intention and with compassion, you know, I feel like that's kind of like, I think it is a little bit like that sort of compassion. It's saying like, no, I am not going to accept like a lie or something from you. You know, I'm going to have an honest conversation, and it's going to be unpleasant and maybe hurt, but I don't know. It's like honesty and truth and healing and doing it with compassion.
Got it. The
I don't
fierce
think about
sword.
parenting, having to say no to a kid, having to say
Well, hey,
no
we
because,
had
you
this
know, it's so
conversation.
hard.
Yeah. No, I mean, coming from issues around alcohol, which create an upside down world, and you have to have this fierce sort of compassion. I've never heard it before, but even in simple situations, and I was talking to you about a work situation where um, there's some issues with outside third parties, and you can look the other way, but that's not helpful. And to speak, I don't know, truth. I don't necessarily like to use that word, but to honestly express some thoughts that might be a little bit hurtful with the right intention, ruffle some feathers, and you have to kind of deal with that. And it's a beautiful concept, the fierce sort of compassion.
Well, I think,
uh,
and even seeing, no, you knowing that the other person, the recipient, is suffering too. Do you know? And so you're recognizing
no, that's
their
correct.
suffering,
And
and
here's
then,
the thing. Here's the thing, and I think it applies to all different circumstances in a lot of ways. I in this instance, there's suffering because we're not being well served, and yet everybody is saying, "Oh, well, we're doing everything we're supposed to be doing and kind of walking the other way. But that doesn't mean you're not dragging this bag around and suffering, So I think that's the tricky piece. People have gotten used to living with it and not noticing it or distracting themselves or
Yeah, it's
minimizing it.
avoidance,
Or
basically.
avoidance,
Yeah,
right?
it's a
Denial. I mean, the whole
defense
thing.
to stay comfortable and
Right.
not get entangled. But I think there's two, and we're afraid of that. And you and I were talking about you and I doing a podcast about like cancel culture and like we're a little afraid to go there, but that it's the same thing. Like we have to talk about things. We can't avoid to stay
Yeah.
comfortable.
One,
The other piece I wanted just to add is like
please.
the compassion thing within relationships, especially really difficult relationships. And I hear a lot of stories about difficult relationships, and
Okay.
the difficult person can talk about steal your peace and dominate, take up space in your head, and really own your attention and most of your life if you let it.
Yes.
And a lot
Yes.
of people just aren't aware that that's happening. It's like this toxic person, it could be a parent, it could be somebody in your family,
Can be.
and to just continue to focus on all of the horrible things that this person has done to you and it continues to do to themselves, and this toxic situation. And if you can step back and see the person as suffering and have compassion and understanding, it doesn't mean you forgive, it doesn't mean you
No, no,
don't hold
right,
the person
right, right,
accountable, it doesn't
right.
mean you don't have boundaries or say no. It's not right.
No, right,
But
right.
I think it frees you to, when you
Absolutely.
have compassion for the other person, like, God, they're suffering. How sad is that? And I'm suffering too. And then that's that
But
whole
I'll
prayer,
tell
the
you.
whole prayer of like the Buddhist, what is it?
Yes. Meta prayer.
Had
Yeah.
a prayer of like showing compassion to yourself and then sending it to someone
Right.
that you love, someone that is hard to love and hard, on a
Right.
strangers and so on. What do they call that? The whole whatever that is, it meta loving kindness
Loving kindness
meditation.
prayer, but it's
Yeah.
a meta prayer, and you practice it for yourself and you pass it on to, and then you practice it for other people. May I be, you know, free of pain and suffering. May I be humble and kind, loving, all these different things.
Yeah. Loving
Yeah,
kindness meditation. Yeah.
loving kindness. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you brought the pod back to compassion. And just sort of at the end here, when, as you were saying, Maureen, when you're able to look at the other person and see their pain, it really pauses your own behaviors to consider, their pain, and not just dive in with some sort of reactive, reaction that you may be experiencing because of what they are doing, but you see them in this suffering mode, and you have compassion. And when someone's suffering, it's not always clear exactly what to do or need, and that's okay. You just can pause and meditate that on that a little bit until the path forward reveals itself.
I think you also turn attention inward to your suffering and this situation, and how, because that's the thing that you can control, right, is you and how you feel and how you understand how you, that's self-compassion too,
Right,
you
right.
know.
No, that's right. That's right.
And the last piece is that,
Oh, sure.
he talks a lot about well, at the foundation of, Buddhist wisdom is that no separation, right? And he's saying compassion is the basis of who we are. It's a we, really. It's like the compassion is in you, it's in me. And when you can see that we're not different, we're both suffering, it
Right.
becomes more of a we in the relationship rather than you against me or you versus
Yes.
me, or we're
Thank you.
separate.
Thank you.
We're not
Thank
different,
you.
right?
Yeah, no,
Um,
thank you for that.
yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
um,
cool. Well, that's Jack Kornfield.
yeah.
Thanks. This was good. It's nice to provide a little background and then get into a little discussion to, prep
Yeah.
people for these things. I've never listened to him, so it was nice to hear about his voice, the soothing, the compassion.
Yeah, he's got good YouTube videos, and it's jackkornfield.com. Lots of
Okay.
stuff on there, lots of resources. So I would encourage people to visit it.
All right. Well, thank you, Maureen. I'm Pierre from Yoga Heals Everywhere.
And Maureen from Landscapes for Learning. Learn to live and live to learn.
Thanks. Peace through grace, my friends. Peace through grace.